الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah Al-Maarij, Surah number 70. Surah Al-Maarij, Surah number 70. And we'll start with Ayah. We'll start the recitation with Ayah number 19. inshallah. Ayah number 19 from Surah Al-Maarij. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الإنسان خلق هلوعا إذا مسه الشر جزوعا وإذا مسه الخير منوعا إلا المصلين الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون والذين في أموالهم حق معلوم للسائل والمحروم والذين يصدقون بيوم الدين والذين يصدقون بيوم الدين والذين هم من عذاب ربهم مشفقون والذين هم من عذاب ربهم مشفقون إن عذاب ربهم غير مأمون إن عذاب ربهم غير مأمون. We took these verses yesterday till maybe إلا المصلين الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون بمد والذين في مد أموالهم حق معلوم تنوين after it ميم إدغام وذغنة للسائل والمحروم the مد here والذين يصدقون بيوم الدين شد on the دال والذين يصدقون والذين هم من عذاب ربهم two memes becomes one with a غنة من عذاب ربهم مشفقون the same thing إن عذاب ربهم غير مأمون إن عذاب نون شدة عذاب ربهم غير مأمون. Yesterday we finished with the two states of the human beings till ayah number 21 إن الإنسان خلق هلوعا إذا مسه الشر جزوعا وإذا مسه الخير منوعا إلا المصلين. إن الإنسان, as we heard yesterday, and it's important that whenever we try to benefit from a verse, we have to go back and to see the context of things, not just the context so that we don't misunderstand, but also to establish in the hearts these types of reminders, which is principles that is built on it, these verses, one verse after the other, so that the person would benefit from it. So when al-insan, which is humankind, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described them that everyone is halu'an. Everyone is halu'. He is always terrified. He's always worried. And this is how the human beings are. And how to deal with it as the exceptions comes. The ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His names and attributes, and to fulfill the commands of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would then guide the person and keep him steadfast. So إن الإنسان خلق هلوعا, which is صيغة مبالغة here. This is intense meaning of al-hala', which is al-hala' is basically to be worried, to be scared. It's one of the words of fear that are mentioned in the Quran. And there are many different words of al-fear, or fear is mentioned in the Quran. Al-khawf, al-khashya, al-hala', al-jaza', al-rahba, al-ru'b. All of these words, synonyms to al-khawf, which as the ulama, they say different levels of it. And some of it would prevent the person from acting properly. And some of it would make the person think bad about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of it, all kinds of levels of evil outcome. So the human beings are halu'an. إذا مسه الشر جزوع وإذا مسه الخير منوعا. If evil afflicted him, he is jazua. Al-jaza' is also one of the meanings of al-hala'. But this is the only place in the Quran that jazu'an is mentioned, which if evil afflicts him, if something bad that he doesn't like happens to him, he becomes terrified, he becomes weak and not able to function in the proper way, think bad of things, things of that nature. And we talked about it. And that means he's not going to act upon patience and upon being pleased with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fear that brings the weakness to the hearts and then to the actions as a result of that. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا, and he also complains and makes these matters worse and worse. And if al-khayr afflicts him, which is the opposite of al-shar, he becomes manu'a. Manu'a from al-man', he withholds what's with him. He's not grateful to Allah. He's not grateful to Allah that Allah bestowed His favor upon him with this khayr that was not given to him except by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he has these two extreme ways of dealing with al-shar and with al-khayr. And if a person reflect upon this, how this is how human beings are, except those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them with the coming exceptions here. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. That's the first characteristics that is mentioned here. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. This ayah number 22, except those who devoted to salah. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he says, أي الموصوفين بتلك الأوصاف. So إلا, except. What comes after that, these are the ones that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made as an exception to this bad and evil characteristics that are mentioned before. Those who have these characteristics, بتلك الأوصاف فإنهم. So if the exception here, that means إذا مسهم الخير, if the musallin, and also the ones that are coming afterwards, if khayr, if good afflicts them, the word that is condemned is manu'a. The bad one is they would withhold what is good. So the musallin, what do? They don't withhold. They are generous. So إِذَا مَسَّهُمُ الْخَيْرُ شَكَرُوا اللَّهِ. So whenever goodness happens to them, they're grateful to Allah. وَأَنْفَقُوا مِمَّا خَوَّلَهُمُ اللَّهِ. They would spend from what Allah entrusted them with. Right? And خَوَّلَهُمُ اللَّهِ, this is basically how the human beings, their reality in this life, that the believers know it. And that's why they believe in it. But this is how things are. It's not that they make things up to make them feel good. Sometimes you might make up something, live in some delusion so that you make yourself feel better. But for the believers, they're upon the haqq and they believe in the truth. And this is the reality. So the wealth, for example, that is given to the people, or any favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's given to them. They have been entrusted with it. They don't have the absolute ownership to it. So that's even the words, when a person says something, he should be careful what he says. So when he says, وَأَنْفَقُوا مِمَّا خَوَّلَهُمُ اللَّهِ, they spend from what Allah entrusted them, like you're entrusted with the money of an orphan, for example. It's not your money, it's the money of the orphan. You're given that money to spend on the orphan, right? Like this. So you've been given whatever you've been given to be grateful to Allah, to fulfill the commands of Allah, and also to enjoy what Allah permitted for you. So it's all by the permission of Allah. So this is when al-khair happens to them. وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. Al-khair in the Quran, in some places, is translated to wealth, right? But al-khair is more general than just wealth, anything. وَأَنفَقُوا مِمَّا خَوَلَهُمُ اللَّهُ وَإِذَا مَسَّهُمُ الشَّرُّ. If الشر or what's bad or what's evil to them, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not decree any evil whatsoever in the absolute sense. It's all tests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if something that they dislike as human beings, whether it's loss of life, wealth, health, and so on, instead of being jazu'an, as mentioned about which is condemned and evil, then sabaru wahtasabu. They become patient, they seek rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they have the hope and still grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon them al-khair, which is the fact that they are patient. So the believers is between patience and being grateful to Allah. Patience requires for the person to be grateful to Allah that Allah made him patient. And then he needs the patience to be grateful to Allah, and so on. So this is when it says إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ, those who make their salah. So it's not that the salah is good while being with the previous characteristics, right? So there's a meaning here that I'm not sure if I'll be able to express it, but when you say the previous two characteristics, إذا مسه الشر جزوع وإذا مسه الخير منوع, right? إلا المصلين. What comes after إلا, what comes after except, either has a part of what's mentioned before or it doesn't, right? And this is the different levels of the al-istithna or إلا. But what it means here, it doesn't mean that the musallin, they still manu'an and jazu'an, but they are musallin. No, it doesn't mean that. It means that since they are musallin, then these two characteristics is not in them. They are different. Why? Because of the salah. So it's not the salah that is praised, it's the musallin, those who make the salah, and as a result of the salah, they are away from these weaknesses that others they face and they experience. And this is how inna salata tanha an al-fahsha'i wal-munkar. Salah forbids the person from al-fahsha' wal-munkar, and if the salah is not doing that to the individual, it means that he's not perfecting his salah. And he still have to make the salah, and the salah is valid, even if it doesn't that to him, meaning that he does not have to repeat it, and it doesn't mean that he leaves it, because this is the difference between a believer and a disbeliever, but he needs to perfect his salah, and to be devoted in the salah. So this is illa al-musallin. And what's before that is the characteristics of the disbelievers, so that shows also that the believers, the difference between them and the disbelievers is the salah. As إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات. So since we're here, Ibn Mas'ud رضي الله عنهما, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud رضي الله عنه, he said, what المصلين الذين يصلونها لوقتها فأما تركها فكفر. Those who pray it on its time, as for abandoning it, of course this is kufr. And also those who would fulfill the obligatory salah in the most perfect way. And why that happens? Because the salah would overtake this jaza' and this withholding the good. Why? Because they have the thiqah and the trust in Allah. They rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they put their trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So as a result of that, they're always grateful to Allah or patient. But since we're going by the tafsir, so illa al-musallin, those who have these characteristics, he mentioned إذا مسهم الخير شكروا, if the khair afflicts them, they're grateful, and they spend wealth and also from their time and from everything that Allah gave them. And if a shar or evil afflicts them, they're patient and they seek rewards from Allah. But then it doesn't stop by إلا المصلين الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون, which means those who remain constant in their صلاة, الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون. He says وقولي في وصفهم, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described them in their صلاة, أي مداومون عليها, they are constant. المداومة is when something is continuously not interrupted whatsoever. في أوقاتها, صلوات has its prescribed time. إن الصلاة كانت على المؤمنين كتابا موقوتا. It's not just 5 salah. Anytime a person chooses to pray the salah, it's in very specific times. And the human beings, they have to be tested with these 5 times that are spread throughout the day. Test with regards to the love of sleep, the love of money, the love of family, whatever, all kinds of things that can distract the person from al-mudawama, from the continuity of the salah. أي مداومون عليها في أوقاتها, in its prescribed time, بشروطها ومكملاتها, by its conditions and what perfects it. Right? So the salah is not what a person would desire to do it the way he like, but according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it as an obligation. And that's why he says وَلَيْسُوا, they are not the ones كَمَنْ لَا يَفْعَلُهَا, the one that doesn't do it, أو يفعلها وقتا دون وقت, or the one that does the salah sometimes versus other times. Some people, they pray the Fajr Salah because they wake up. So they pray Fajr. Then the rest of the day, there's no Salah whatsoever. Some people, like, they do this. Some people, they pray Fajr and they go to work and they come back, they make up Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib. Right? They're not making Salah. They're just following their desires. Right? Salah is Salatul Fajr in Fajr time, Salatul Dhuhr in the Dhuhr time, and so on. So, and whatever rukhsa, whatever ease is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not from the Muslims. They made up the ease as other nations did to themselves and deviated from the haqq. But rather, when we have the rukhsa in the salah, when is it permissible to shorten the salah? It's deen, Quran, Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. When is it permissible to combine the salah? It's deen. It's all wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, أو يفعلها وقتا دون وقت أو يفعلها على وجه الناقص. Or the third case here, someone that does the salawat al-khams in its time, but it's deficient. So the salah has to be perfected because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us to make iqamatu salah wa aqimu salah, establish the salah, not just make salah. And this is, as we know, this is a lifetime thing to work on. Not that it's something that is done and the person finished with it. It's every day a beautiful struggle with one's nafs. So the person win every day his salawat. He makes sure that he prays it in the proper way. If it's men, jama'ah in the masjid. If they're away from the masjid, jama'ah. If there's no jama'ah, then they would pray anyway, but they would establish the salah in the most perfect way with its khushu', devotion, and with perfect conditions and pillars and all of these types of things to be established according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered them. And that's why you would find in the tafsir all kinds of details that we know that it's part of the salah. There's no such an act of ibadah that you would find so much evidences for it in the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, the virtues and the ahkam. That's the most important act of one's day and night. And as when we're going through the book of At-Targhib wa Tarhib, many chapters just in the salah, and before that in the wudu. So that's why in the tafsir you would find the many different ahadith with even describing دائمون الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون. دائمون, that means consistent, as the waqt and the wajibat and so on. And as some, when you talk about al-ma'u daim, the water, when it's the word ad-daim is used for the water, it's already there. So what is the meaning of the continuous water? No, it means al-ma' as-sakin, when the water is calm, right, is not disturbed. So, and there's whether it's permissible, like the stagnant water. Stagnant water is there for a long time. So the mudawama is also, it gives the person, he is not struggling with his own self anymore, whether he's going to make salah today or not. Right? It's already done. That this is his life. There's no option for him that, oh, I missed the salah today. he does not have this in himself, because this is al-mudawama, or the consistency. Once a person is like that, it becomes part of his norm. And many other things, of course. So this is required. The reflection is something else. So the meaning of it is clear. إِلَى الْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَلَى صَلَاتِهِمْ دَائِمُونَ. So the first important thing is the salah. And then وَالَّذِينَ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ. And those who in whose wealth there is a known right. وَالَّذِينَ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ. He says, مِنْ زَكَاةٍ وَصَدَقَةٍ. Zakah and charity. So وَالَّذِينَ, those who في أموالهم, in their wealth, حق. حق, which is right. That means it's not the portion of their wealth, which is the zakah, is not their wealth. It's the haqq, is the right of others. So the believers also, when they look at the zakah, they don't have that, even though they are manu'an as a human beings, or they have this greed, but when they're giving the zakah, they're not giving from their money. They're giving from the portion that does not belong to them. And the money itself does not belong to them in the absolute sense. It's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But yes, with their ownership to another human being, the portion of the zakah in that does not even belong to him. It belongs to someone else. So that's why it's haram to delay it even for a day, because it does not. This is not your money. This is the money of whatever the subject when it comes to the matter of the zakah. So الذين في أموالهم حق معلوم. معلوم, very precise, very well known. And that's what, with the different levels of people that would have rights in this wealth. This is the spending which is obligatory. Man, it's obligatory upon him to spend on his dependencies, his wife, his children, and so on. And the zakah to be given, and also without the zakah to the aqarib, to the relatives if they are in need of, because it's part of صلة الرحم, and so on. So الذين في أموالهم حق معلوم to who? للسائل والمحروم. للسائل والمحروم, the next ayah, which is for the beggar who asks, and for the mahrum, the deprived one that lost his property, his wealth. So والذين في أموالهم حق معلوم للسائل. السائل is the one that asks. So الذي يتعرض للسؤال. And السؤال, is it permissible for a person to ask for people's money? This is a subject here which is not permissible. It's not permissible for a person to ask, like to beg, unless he took all the means and there's no other means for him to sustain his necessities in life. And then it's permissible for him. And as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ shows how it's a sinful act for someone to ask people when he has what is sufficient for him. And he would come in the day of judgment without muz'at lahm, without a piece of flesh on his face in the day of judgment, as a result of asking people takathuran, to increase his money. And which is again a su'al, especially with a su'al. When someone begs from people money, is just to sustain his life. If every other means is given. And the sadaqah, the charity, as the Prophet ﷺ, لا تحل الصدقة لكل ذي مرة سوي. Sadaqah is not permissible for everyone that has strength and ability to earn. And he's upright. So that means it is not permissible for him to ask. He needs to go do something so that he would earn. So this is for the one that is asking. But someone comes and asks, then there's a portion of one's wealth to those who ask. للسائل والمحروم. المحروم is the one that is deprived. وهو المسكين الذي لا يسأل الناس فيعطوه. The one that does not ask people. So, and he's still in state of being deprived. He doesn't have the means to sustain his life. ولا يفطن له. And لا يفطن له, that means people they're not aware of him. Because he has izzah in his nafs, he has honor in his own self, he does not humiliate himself by asking. So people don't pay attention to him. They don't know him, that he is in need. فَيَتَصَدَّقُ عَلَيْهِ, he will give him charity. As you see here, this is then how will a person know him? This is an obligation upon those who have means to check others out, to make sure that not to go and attack people's privacy, but someone has to figure out who are those they do not come and ask. right? So some people, their charity is only when people ask, but there's effort to be done to see those who have rights still for one's wealth. So this is a sa'il wal mahrum. Even the sa'il also supposed to be mahrum, but when both are mentioned, it gives one meaning to the other. And this is as in Surah Al-Dhariyat, وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ, which is different than how the disbelievers جَمَعَ فَأَوْعَى, as it's mentioned, he collects and he amasses. This is one of the characteristics of the disbelievers. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, when he was asked, would a believer, can a believer be a coward? Meaning not that it's permissible, but it's valid to happen with his weakness of iman. He says yes, but can a believer be a bakhil or greedy or miser? He said no. It's against being a believer. So because at least the zakah has to be given if he has means to give the zakah. So للسائل والمحروم والذين يصدقون بيوم الدين, and those who believe in the day of recompense. والذين يصدقون بيوم الدين. He says يؤمنون بما أخبر الله به. That means they believe in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed them, وأخبرت به رسله, and the messengers, they inform the people of what's in يوم الدين, which is الدين here with the meaning of الجزاء, recompense, which is the day of Al-Qiyamah, من الجزاء والبعث. And that's why يوم الدين, مالك يوم الدين, the الدين is الجزاء. That's why they pray, they give charity, all of that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and seeking the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only in the hereafter. And the hereafter is the time where the jaza is going to be established. ويتيقنون ذلك, they have the certainty in it. فيستعدون الآخرة, they're always preparing themselves for the hereafter. ويسعون لها سعيها, and they take the means to, as-sa'i is when you walk diligently to something, so they're working for it, they're working for the hereafter the way it ought to be. والتصديق بيوم الدين يلزم منه التصديق بالرسل. He says here that التصديق, to believe that يوم الدين, the day of recompense, the day of Al-Qiyamah, is the truth, by necessity brings with it to believe in the messengers of Allah. وبما جاءوا به من الكتب, and what they brought to the people from the books. Because who's the one that informed the people of this? Are the messengers of Allah and the books that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. So here وَالَّذِينَ يُصَدِّقُونَ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ. And this is, as mentioned here, this is even though the foundation of the deen, but it shows here it mentioned the physical actions first, and then the foundation of it is their belief in the day of Al-Qiyamah. Why they're different than those who are mentioned before? Because of the tasdeeq, believing in Yawm Al-Qiyamah, Yawm Al-Jaza. They understand that this life is not their life. This is only a test and a passage life. And they've been entrusted with whatever they have. And there's Yawm Al-Qiyamah, this is the real life. This is the everlasting life. Once a person just fix this in his heart, everything becomes clear, and with the wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ مِنْ عَذَابِ رَبِّهِمْ مُشْفِقُونَ, those who fear the torment of their Lord. As he says, أي خائفون وجلون فيتركون لذلك كل ما يقربهم من عذاب الله. They fear, they have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore they leave everything that would get them closer to the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when someone fears something, he would definitely he would never do the things that would get him have what he fears. Otherwise, there's something wrong with his intellect. So, mushfiqun al-ishfaq is, as mentioned before, is when a person fears something that is going to happen or might happen in the future. So as a result of that, he expects it, so he would take measures to protect himself from it, and it gives him the grief and the sadness, what if that happens to him? Not that he is sad now, but when he looks ahead, and if he sees himself that this might be his place, it brings him sadness, so the sadness makes him then steadfast upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, and you compare all of these words together, that the believers, they are with regards to the punishment of Allah, mushfiqun, and having the hala' part of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the human beings to fear. They have something called fear, one of which is so that they fear the hereafter. and how the disbelievers, they are terrified if evil afflicts them, versus the believers, they have this shafaqa, which is the fear with grief, with goodness, with mercy. And that's the same word is used when you see a weak creation of Allah suffering. What happens to you in your heart? This is called ash-shafaqa. You have that concern towards them. It's mercy and it's fear for them. It's mixture of all of these things together. So وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ مِنْ عَذَابِ رَبِّهِمْ مُشْفِقُونَ. And مِنْ عَذَابِ رَبِّهِمْ is mentioned first to show that this is what occupies them. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ, these are the believers, مِنْ عَذَابِ رَبِّهِمْ مُشْفِقُونَ. Not مُشْفِقُونَ مِنْ عَذَابِ رَبِّهِمْ. No, the order of the words, of course, has its significance here. That means this is what occupies them, make them fear and flee away from what is punishable. Why? إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّهِمْ غَيْرُ مَأْمُونَ. Because indeed, the torment of the Lord is that before which none can feel secure. إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّهِمْ غَيْرُ مَأْمُونَ. Indeed, the punishment of the Lord, غير is not مأمون from al-amn, is not secured. As he says, أي هو العذاب الذي يخشى ويحذر. If a person is, this is the adab that a person should fear and should take means to avoid. If someone is already given the security, he's not going to be among those who, the people of the hellfire. He has perfect security is given to him, so he does not have fear. But in that sense, from the punishment. But even the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and before that, the messengers of Allah, they were given in their lifetime, like al-ashar al-mubashsharun bil-jannah, they were giving the glad tidings that they are from the people of Jannah, and they're not from the people of the hellfire. And they were the most fearful of Allah. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deserved from the people to fear Him alone, subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they have to fear. If you don't fear Allah, you will fear something else. So, إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّهِمْ غَيْرُ مَأْمُونَ brings the fears of Allah. And this is by the mercy of Allah. So if someone would say, how can I bring this fear of Allah in my heart? This ayah is one of the means to achieve that. Because who has been given the security that he is not going to be punished? No one. After who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stated clearly in the wahy. The prophets of Allah, the companions radiallahu anhum, like this. So, and also غَيْرُ مَأْمُونَ for those who associate partners with Allah, or those who disbelieved in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what means here, لا يأمن أحد. No one, as long as a person is alive, and he's not been given the glad tidings that he's from among the people of Jannah, no one can then guarantee that he is going to be safe from the punishment of Allah. So that means what's an obligation is for the person to fear and to take the means to protect him. And this is an act of ibadah to Allah with the hope for the rewards of Allah, with the hope for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And both will keep the person going in this life. إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّهِمْ غَيْرُ مَأْمُونَ. So, and of course, the disbelievers are the first to be addressed by this. And that's why, afterwards, more characteristics to be mentioned. So, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the evil within our own selves and to make us able to fulfill these matters. And as you see that some of actions are physical, which is the easiest ones to be done, but the foundation of it is what's in the heart, and that requires for the person to establish it and to be patient with oneself. And it happens with the physical actions. So to fulfill the physical actions, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered us, with the proper acts of done by the heart, so that the person would perfect the physical actions and purify his heart. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala because of the time. Attendance code inshallah is إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ, except the observers of prayer. إِلَّا الْمُصَلِّينَ. There's a question here regarding aqiqah. Are we supposed to do it within 7 days the child is born? Also, is there any age specifications of the goat lamb that needs to be slaughtered? The answer, it's perfectly the time that is for the aqiqah is after 7 days of the child's birth. This is the perfect time. If a person is not able, or he didn't do it, or forgot, or he didn't do it after 7 days, anytime afterwards. Does it have to be multiplications of 7? No. Because some people, they say, If it's not 7, then 14, then 21. No, anytime after the 7 days, even if a person is 60 years old and no aqiqah was done on him, then he makes aqiqah on himself, for his own self. And the specifications of the goat and lamb and the animal is exactly as Eid al-Adha. So the goat has to be 1 year old at least. The sheep has to be 6 months at least. If he shares the part of a cow, but it's best to be done goat or sheep as far as the aqiqah is concerned. But the others are also valid, but according to the what's in Eid al-Adha, the same rulings applies. Um, is it okay to ask for a promotion and raise in one's salary at work, even though your current salary is sufficient? Asking has many different categories of it, of course. What is mentioned in the ayat, which is forbidden, this is begging from people's wealth without the right to do so. Someone is working, that means the contract between him and whoever he works for, عقد إجارة. This is a contract of إجارة. He works for benefits, whatever. So if he thinks that he deserves more, he can ask for it. It's his rights and it's not humiliating. And as long as if they didn't give him and he accept whatever money they give him, he has to fulfill his job perfectly because there's a contract between them. But this is not the same as humiliating oneself. It's not humiliation because he's doing work for them and he's getting compensated for it. No. No. Mm.
There is one worse of the fact. How does it
نعم الصدقة. نعم. No, يصدقون here, it's only for believing. الصدقة is would not be say يصدقون. It can be with يصدقون or يتصدقون. So there's slight difference. الصدقة or charity is different here. So you cannot say يصدقون. You have to put another shadda on the sad to make it صدقة. يصدقون. The same letters, yes, but the vowels are different. So the vowels are different. So here, يصدقون, to believe in something to be the truth. If you want to keep the same letters to be the same, then you have to put a shadda on the sad, يصدقون, as it's mentioned in the Quran, or يتصدقون. So it's more of believing that charity is the truth, but that extra vowel makes it extended to others. So like the pattern of the verbs goes into the sarf. The one on someone yasaddaq, that means he gives it to others. So it's not the same word because the sound of it is different.
terminology? I want to see if there is any correlation between aside and al-fuqara masakin.
No.
So is there any correlation?
Right. السائل is the one that asks. He might be deprived, mahroom. That's what mahroom means. Or he might not be deprived because people might be rich and they still beg and ask. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say السائل المحروم, السائل والمحروم. So, and that's why they say if someone comes and asks and you don't know the person, if you know that he's rich, you don't give him. But if you don't know, since he is sa'il, give him something that would not be significant if you just want to give something. So because he's asking. So that's why a sa'il is with regards to asking, begging. And that's the norm of the human beings, that they don't lie and they don't humiliate themselves. That's the norm. So if someone takes it as a profession, then you don't help him to spread evil. And when people, their fitrah is clean and good, this is the last thing that a person would do to himself, is to go beg from people. So that's why when someone reaches that state, he has to be helped and he has to be given. The other things that people do, which has nothing to do with that, it's not sa'il. He's not asking. He's just manipulating. So if a person get to know that, that's different. And a Muslim should not be deceived. But the sa'il has to be deprived. He has to be in need to ask. But that's why you don't know if he's mahroom or not when he come and ask you. That's why you give him. Versus al-mahroom, as they mentioned here, is the one that you don't know that the one that does not come and ask. So he's mahroom, he's deprived, like the sa'il, but he never comes and asks. So that means you have to go find him. Do you see that? That's the correlation. Basically, one is coming forward and one he's among the crowd. You're not able to see him. And he's still deprived like a sa'il, like the one that is asking. So people have to find these types of individuals.
Say the mahrum has part of the poor person. Faqir,
Yes. Right. Al-Faqir wal-Miskin, they're both poor, but when they're both mentioned in the same context, one is poorer than the other. Al-Faqir is much poorer than the Miskin. So it's levels of poverty, yes. No.
people will ask,
Right. Correct. Nowadays it's difficult. Like everything else, this is when the more when there's the religion is not as strong in the lives of the people, and there's times of fitan, it becomes difficulty also for a person, difficult to give for the sake of Allah. That's part of the difficulties of time, is not that there are wars, and it's part of that is that the person, when he wants to give zakah, he doesn't find a place to give zakah. There's not enough opportunities for a person to do good. For example, I'm just saying. So if that's the case, a person has to put more effort. More effort has to be done. And that's why the zakah specifically, it's the job of the people of authority. They are supposed to collect the money for the zakah and they distribute it because they know best. But if that is not happening, then a person has to put more effort to the best of his ability to make sure that it reaches those who deserve it. Allah musta'an. Allah make it easy. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.